Have you ever wondered how a loaf of bread could ignite a revolution that would change the history of one of the most powerful empires in Europe? At the end of the 18th century, a storm was brewing in Central Europe. A revolution shook the political landscape, overthrowing the long-standing monarchy and forever altering the course of history. This is the story of a bloody period in history that played a crucial role in shaping modern democracy. It is known as the French Revolution. Causes of the French Revolution. As the 18th century was coming to an end, France was paying a large sum of money for the American Revolution and the extravagant lifestyle of King Louis XVI, pushing the country to the brink of bankruptcy. Not only was the royal treasury depleted, but issues such as crop failure, drought, livestock diseases, and the rising price of bread also caused unrest among the peasants and the poor in urban areas. Desperation and anger towards a high-tax regime without any solutions led to riots, looting, and strikes. In the autumn of 1786, the financial manager for King Louis XVI, Charles-Alexandre de Calonne, proposed financial reforms, including taxing the land of the aristocracy. To garner support for the reform measures and prevent increasing dissatisfaction from the aristocracy, the king summoned the Estates General, a council representing the clergy, nobility, and middle-class citizens of France. Notably, this council was summoned for the first time in a long time since 1614. This meeting was scheduled to take place on May 5, 1789. During the waiting period, representatives from the three social classes in each region would compile a list of grievances to submit to the king. Since 1614, the population of France had undergone significant changes. The Third Estate, which included the middle class and non-noble individuals, now accounted for 98% of the population. But they were still controlled by the other two estates. Prior to the meeting on May 5th, the Third Estate actively called for support to achieve equal representation and abolish the privileged voting rights of the aristocracy and the concept of voting based on social status rather than the number of people. While the majority of the population desired financial and judicial reforms, as well as a better representative government, the aristocracy did not want to lose the privileges they had in the traditional system. The Oath on the Tennis Court. The Estates General, officially held at Versailles, became a heated debate on voting procedures, causing tension between the three social classes and the council. This overshadowed the initial goals of the meeting and diminished the credibility of the king, who had summoned the assembly. On June 17th, when negotiations on procedures stalled, the Third Estate held a separate meeting and officially adopted the title of the National Assembly. 3 days later, they gathered at a nearby tennis court and took the tennis court oath, pledging not to disband until a new constitution was established. Within a week, the majority of the representatives from the Third Estate and 47 nobles joined. On June 27th, King Louis XVI had no choice but to accept and include all three estates in the new National Assembly. Bastille and Great Fear. On June 12th, as the National Assembly, also known as the Constituent Assembly, continued to meet at Versailles, fear and unrest engulfed the capital. Despite being jubilant over the weakening of the monarchy, the people of Paris began to panic upon hearing rumors of a military coup to overthrow the king. Tensions reached a climax on July 14th when a crowd attacked the Bastille fortress to seize ammunition and weapons. This event is commemorated in France as a national holiday and marks the beginning of the French Revolution. The wave of revolutionary support and instability quickly spread throughout the country. Peasants who had endured years of oppression began to attack and destroy the property of aristocrats, landlords, and nobles. Known as the Great Fear, this uprising forced many nobles to flee France. This event, along with the decision of the Constituent Assembly to end the feudal regime on August 4, 1789, marked a turning point in history, which historian Georges Lefebvre later described as the end of the old order. Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. In late August, the Assembly passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. This document highlighted democratic values, drawing inspiration from Enlightenment philosophers such as John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The Declaration reflected the commitment of the Assembly to build a new system based on the principles of equality, freedom, and popular sovereignty. Drafting a new constitution for France was not easy, especially in the context of an economic crisis. Members of the Parliament had to deal with fundamental issues regarding the form and function of the new political systems. Issues such as who would be elected, whether the clergy would be loyal to the Pope in Rome or the French government, as well as the role of the monarchy, especially after the king's attempted escape in June 1791, were raised. Finally, on September 3, 1791, the first written constitution of France was passed, which established a constitutional monarchy, reserving certain powers for the king. However, this compromise did not satisfy the more radical individuals such as Maximilien de Robespierre, Camille Desmoulins, and Georges Danton. They initiated a movement in support of a republican government and the trial of King Louis XVI. The French Revolution becomes radical. In April 1792, the new Legislative Assembly declared war on Austria and Prussia, suspecting that French emigrants were forming alliances against the revolution and also wanting to spread their revolutionary values throughout Europe. Meanwhile, within France, the political situation became tense. On August 10, 1792, a group led by the Jacobins seized important government buildings in Paris and arrested the king. Just a month later, after a series of violent events in which the rebels in Paris killed hundreds of people accused of counter-revolutionary activities, the Legislative Assembly was replaced by the National Convention, which declared the end of the monarchy and the establishment of a new French Republic. On January 21, 1793, King Louis XVI was convicted and executed for treason, and his wife, Marie Antoinette, was also executed 9 months later. The Reign of Terror. After the death of the king, France continued to fight against major European powers. Within the country, deep divisions within the National Convention led the French Revolution to become extremely violent and chaotic. In June 1793, the Jacobins seized control of the National Convention from the more moderate Girondins. They implemented drastic measures such as adopting a new calendar and abolishing the Catholic Church. In particular, the Jacobins initiated a period known as the Reign of Terror, which lasted about 10 months, during which thousands of people considered threats to the revolution were executed. Robespierre, the leader of the Committee of Public Safety, ordered the execution of many people until he himself was executed on July 28, 1794. During the Reign of Terror, over 17,000 people were convicted and executed, and many others died without trial or while in custody. The Thermidorian reaction. The death of Robespierre marked the beginning of the Thermidorian reaction, a more moderate phase in which the French people rose up against the violence of the Reign of Terror. By August 22, 1795, the National Convention, which still had many surviving veterans from the Terror period, passed a new constitution, establishing the first bicameral legislative system in France. The Directory, consisting of 5 members elected by the Parliament, would hold political power, despite opposition from supporters of the monarchy and the Jacobins. However, the military, under the leadership of the young General Napoleon Bonaparte, quickly stabilized the situation. The Rise of Napoleon. During the 4 years of the Directory's rule, they faced many difficulties such as unstable finances, public dissatisfaction, and especially corruption. By the late 1790s, to maintain their power, they relied heavily on the military and granted more political power to generals on the political scene. As confidence in the Directory declined, on November 9, 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte carried out a coup, dissolving the Directory and becoming the first consul of France. This not only marked the end of the French Revolution, but also ushered in the Napoleonic era, in which France became a dominant power in Europe. The French Revolution and the bread shortage. The French philosopher Voltaire once sarcastically said, "The people of Paris only want opera and white bread." But bread has been a hot issue in French history, especially during the French Revolution. The event of the people attacking the Bastille on July 14, 1789, largely stemmed from the need for grain. Although the French Revolution had deeper underlying causes than just a bread shortage, this situation increased the dissatisfaction of the people with the monarchy. The shortage of grain led to riots in 1529 in the city of Lyon, known as the Crisis du Pain, bread crisis, a violent uprising where thousands of people looted and destroyed the homes of wealthy citizens, ultimately taking grain from the city's granaries. The situation only became more difficult in the 18th century, starting from the year 1760, with the advice of the group of physiocratic economists. Before that, the court had tried to abolish the regulations on grain trade and promote free trade, but this policy failed. In April and May 1775, due to food shortages and high prices, a series of riots broke out in areas around Paris. This event is also known as the Bread War, and the riot movement invaded Versailles before pouring into Paris and other rural areas. In the 1780s, the situation in France became tense for many reasons. The population increased significantly, and in 1789, France had an additional 5 to 6 million people compared to 1720, while grain production did not increase enough to meet the demand. In addition, the majority of French people only accepted a diet based on grain, making bread an important commodity, accounting for 60 to 80% of the household budget. Therefore, any fluctuations in grain prices could cause instability. The demand for bread became a major issue, and the shortage of bread became a tool for revolutionaries. In 1789, a plot at the Bastille was planned to incite an uprising against the monarchy. Among the terms of the plot was to exacerbate the severity of the bread shortage, forcing the bourgeoisie to react. Shortly after, the Bastille was attacked. Bread may have played an important role in promoting the French Revolution, but after the Revolution, the French people still worried about the bread supply. Just 2 days after the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen was passed on August 29, 1789, all regulations on the grain market were abolished, creating fears of speculation, hoarding, and exports. On October 21, 1789, a baker named Denis François was accused of hiding bread for smuggling. Although a trial confirmed his innocence, a mob still captured him and hanged him, then forced his pregnant wife to kiss his bloodied face. Jacques Turgot, an economic advisor during the early reign of Louis XVI, had advised the king not to intervene in the bread issue.